This is Geometry Lesson 1-2. The topic is points, lines, and planes. Our objective for this lesson is that you will be able to understand what basic terms and postulates of geometry are when you leave. So let's start off with, what is geometry? Geometry is a mathematical system built on accepted facts, basic terms, and definitions. From these three things, we come up with a lot more, but we're going to need to start off by knowing what these three things are. So um, here are some terms that we use. The first one is a point. A point in geometry indicates a location and it has no size. No matter how large you draw it, it has no size. It's just talking about a specific place. A point is represented by a dot and it is named by a single letter. So you have an example over here on the right. This is how you would name a point. You put a little dot and you'd put a letter above it. The next thing we have is a line. A line is represented by a straight path that extends in two opposite directions without end and it has no thickness. So no matter how thick you draw a line, we actually don't say it has thickness. It's just talking about a straight path. A line contains infinitely many points, and that's really important, that it has infinitely many points all along it. A line is named by any 2 points, which are capital letters on the line. So this line over here would be A, B. And since it is a line, we then draw a line above A, B, because A and B are both points on that. You also might notice this little cursive L right there. So we can also name it with a single lowercase letter, such as that cursive L. So there you have that. Our next topic is planes. A plane is represented by a flat surface that extends without end and has no thickness once again. A plane contains infinitely many lines. You start with a point, and then you have a line which has infinitely many points, and then you have a plane which has infinitely many lines. A line is named by using a capital letter, such as in this one. You may notice that there's one capital letter here that does not have a point with it, P. We can call this plane P. Or it can be named by at least 3 points that are in the plane. And we notice you have 3 points in the plane, A, B, and C, and so we can call it plane A, B, C like that. The key part about those 3 points, A, B, C, is they cannot be collinear. We'll talk about in a little bit. That means that they cannot be on the same line. They have to be separated like that. 2 more basic terms are collinear points. Collinear points are points that lie on the same line. We just discussed that. And then we also have coplanar points. And coplanar points are points and lines in the same plane. All right, so now that we've talked about all these definitions, let's get into actually naming some points and lines and planes. It says, what are 2 other ways to name QT? And when you see QT written like this, with that line above, you're actually saying, what are 2 other ways to name line QT? Because Q and T have a line above them. Notice that that line has arrows on it. That is a really important thing. That means they're actually talking about a line that goes in both directions forever. So let's first find those. So we find Q and T. They're right there. The question asks us to find 2 other ways to name line QT. Well, if you look up on the page, we have 2 ways to name a line by using 2 uppercase letters that are on the line and are points, or by a lowercase letter that is with that line. So if we look, let's check, are there any other points on that line? So if we follow it, it's this line right here, T, Q, there's an N on it. So we can use an N in conjunction with one of those letters to name it. So I might pick N, T. Now when I write NT, I'm going to make sure I have that line drawn above it with the arrows in both directions because that means I'm actually talking about a line NT. You could also call it NQ. Now the other way to name a line is with a lowercase letter. So that's not referring to a point. If you look, there's this lowercase letter M that's along there, so we could also call it M. And when we write it with just one letter, we actually write it lowercase, typically kind of like in an italic or a cursive font, and it actually does not have a line above it when it's only written as one letter. The next question says, what are two other ways to name plane P? So we want to find out, where is plane P. If you look, there's a P over here on the left, and since it's not a point, that must be the plane P they're talking about. It's going to be this parallelogram you can see right there. So everything that's in there is on plane P. Well, we have two options to name a plane. One option is by the capital letter. That's not a point. And the other is by 3 points on the plane that don't lie in the same line, meaning they're not, you can't draw a straight line through them. And so if we look, there happens to be a line in this plane right here, and on that line there are 3 points, R, Q, and S, which means that you cannot use the name RQS for your plane. So you have to find another letter. There happens to be another letter V over here. And so what you want to do is you want to take 2 letters from that RQS line and match them up with V. And it doesn't matter which 2 letters you pick. I might pick R and S. R and S, and then my third letter has to be that V because it's not in a line with those other 3. Notice I don't put a line above it, and the reason being that this is a plane. It's not a line. So RSV is the name of this plane. So you could have rewritten those in any order. You could say VSR, RVS, SVR, etc. It doesn't matter as long as you have those 3 letters together. Another option that you could have is maybe Q, S, and V. You also could have had R, Q, and V. All of those are names for that plane, and in each one of those 3 names, you could mix up the 3 letters in it in any order, and it would be fine for this example. So it says, part C says, what are the name of the 3 collinear points? We kind of discussed this already. You want to find 3 points that are in the same line. There's actually 2 possible answers to this one. So I want to pause it and see if you can find both possible answers. Hopefully you got one of these from our discussion above, but R, Q, and S are collinear, or you could say T, Q, and M are collinear. The next question then says, what are the names of 4 coplanar points? Coplanar means, once again, that they lie in the same plane. And there are actually multiple answers for this one as well. So why don't you pause the video and see what you can figure out on your own. The obvious answer on this one, or the more obvious answer on this one, is that R, Q, S, and V would be coplanar points. They all lie in plane P, as we discussed about earlier. But there are actually other options. One possible option is T, Q, M, and let's say S. Those 4 would also be coplanar. See if you can come up with any other options, and if you can, show them to me in class. So what I'd like you to do next is to pause the video and try to complete all 4 of these questions with the drawing given to you again. So pause the video and see what you can do. For A, I found 3 other ways to name RS. You could say line RS, you could say line QS, line QR, or line L. We already discussed what are 2 more ways to name plane P kind of earlier, so I'm going to skip that one. C, it says what are names of 3 collinear points. We kind of discussed that one already as well, so I'm going to skip that one. But D says what are 2 points that are not coplanar with points R, S, and V? Well, if you look at R, S, and V, they're on plane P, which means you need 2 points that aren't. The only points that aren't are T and N. This is the end of part 1 of Geometry Lesson 1-2.